All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. The conversation begins right now. The main question we're asking you, we know now that the Dialogue Committee wants to be entrenched in law. In fact, the next time their meeting is on the 21st, which is next week, because during that period, they want the technical committees to entrench whatever they're going to discuss into law. But first, is your agenda on the table? That's a question we're asking you. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. Let me introduce my guests real quick, starting from my farthest right, Alenga Torostad, Policy Advisor. Thank you so much for making time. Tabitha Ogutu is here, Community Development Specialist. Asante sana for making time. Reverend Elias Otieno Agola, NCK Nairobi County. Thank you very much for making time. And Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch. Asante sana for making time. So, Kevin, I'll start with you. You've seen the issues that they're raising preliminarily before, because the now committee wants to be entrenched in law. But have you seen anything that is pressing to the Kenyans at this particular moment?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Trevor. And to be honest with you, in my view, the only thing that I think is an issue, which might not be really pressing to the Kenyan citizen, is a matter around IEBC. And that is purely because of a few reasons. One is that we have the due date for our delimitation of boundaries, which is actually overdue. And the second reason is that we have Kenyans in this country who are now not being represented, either at the National Assembly or at the county assemblies, because they lost their representatives. That's their members of National Assembly and also the MCAs, either through accidents and other reasons. But in terms of the citizens' agenda, I don't think that whatever took a majority of Kenyans to the streets is on the table. Because when these conversations began, the matter on the table was cost of living, which in my view, in fact, I still hold the opinion that we didn't have to have mandamanus for cost of living conversations to take place. But it was good for two reasons. One, that Article 37 empowers citizens to demonstrate and picket and push for various duty bearers to undertake their roles. But that two, the Kenya Kwanza government needed to be given some pressure. And so Azimio took that as an opportunity, therefore, to exert pressure for probably what we are seeing happening right now, which is talks for talks. Whether it's talks for talks or talks about talks, in my view, I think it is just talks for talks. Kuongea too, because now we have to talk. But the substance of it, in my view, Trevor, I don't think is really centering on the Kenyan citizen. I don't think there is a lot of faith to warrant the Kenyan citizens' hope in the kind of conversations that are taking place. Yeah. Largely because we've been here before, Trevor. Okay. We have been here before, and it is quite unfortunate that we have people who are being paid to sit and have conversations on taxpayers' monies. Mm-hmm. But we have failed to learn certain lessons from the past. And I think that the BBI process really should be able to give us a centerpiece and a focal point for lessons to be learned. And in fact, it even further surprises me to hear the co-chairs talking about a bill, that within these few days, as if Kenyans do not know the lawmaking process in this country, what it entails, how it is supposed to be done. And further to that, the issues which they are presenting, which include, number one, both sides, of course, I remember that they have talked about entrenchment of the office of the official position leader, entrenchment of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and even the possible bringing back of office of the Prime Minister. Of course, Azimio has talked about inclusivity, which is a big issue in this country, particularly when you look at the public service and how Kenya Kwanza government is hiring and firing various cadres of government. Azimio has also talked about issues around audit of last year's election, which I think is a big issue. Yeah. But does it warrant the kind of demos? Does it really even require for leaders to sit and talk for us to audit an election? And if we were to audit an election, so what? What is the issue of the audit within that particular election? Right. So I've tried to respond to your question by gallivanting here and there, but bottom line is the people's agenda is not on the table. It's not. Okay, I'll come to you and find out from your perspective what you think the people's agenda really is. But Reverend, the NCCK, actually, the clergy want to be involved in this dialogue. Yeah. How exactly? As mediators, or is it that you want to table your own agendas there?
Well, thank you, Trevor. As Kevin has already alluded to the fact that what is being placed on the table for discussion has to do more of the political realignments and the political division of the national cake on how they can benefit as politicians and how they are able to get to where they want to be in terms of being involved in issues of governance in this country. But we'd want to let everybody know that the real issues, apart from the issue of the IBC, is not being tabled on the table. There are more issues that are supposed to be discussed. The issues of the cost of living, the issues of the youth agenda, what the youths need, not what the youths want, and not what is being defined as what is the need for the youths, but what exactly is this that is supposed to be done. Yeah. The issues of the promotion of a dignified life in this country, where people in leadership, whether it is in the opposition or in the government, fight for the better lives of the country and the people that live in this country, the citizens, those who employed them, those who are the taxpayers. So how would we want to come into the talks? We believe as a church and as NCCK that the real issues are not just political. The real issues go beyond what the political class would like to place on the table. The real issues should be discussed by leaders in this country. And politicians are not the only leaders in this country. Of course, they will tell us they are elected by us, but those who have been brought into the table of discussion, not all of them are elected. And therefore, we also have other leaders in this country. The religious leaders are leaders. Mm-hmm. The leaders in the civil society are leaders. The leaders in the other sectors in this country are leaders. So we need a multi-sectoral approach where not just a few cliques of people come in onto the table. Okay. And so our call is that we need to discuss the issues that affect every Kenyan, and where it comes to major disagreements where these people cannot talk, then again we can come in as mediators. Okay. And this is within our mandate. Okay. Because as the religious sector, we have all these people in our churches, we have them in our mosques, we have them in our temples, and all of them are leaders. And sometimes we have to call them to table and say, yes, there is a structure for parliamentarians to talk. Yeah. But is there a structure for the president and the opposition leaders to talk? There is no such structure. Okay. And so dialogue is where these people come and discuss the issues that affect the common mwananchi from a more critical way, and looking at it keenly on how to come up with solutions that are lasting. Okay, we'll come to the real issues in just a bit from a perspective, but let me get Tabitha's view on this. Tabitha, have you seen the issues concerning Kenyans being put on the table? Because you've heard from both sides what they're talking about.
Absolutely. I think this is a question that every Kenyan is asking from all, I think, the angles, be it the women, be it the youth, be it the old people in the society, be it economically. I mean, when we look at what Kenya Kwanza has fronted as what they would want to be discussed as items during this bipartisan talks, it just begs one question of how people-centered are these issues? And if they are, of course, some of them are like the two-thirds gender conversation, which, of course, is a conversation that already has a framework that just needs to be implemented, and we need to have seriousness with the government leading the talk and strengthening institutions that are necessary to make sure that the two-thirds genders rule is something that is a talk of the past in this country. So why would we need it in 30 days at such a point where Kenyans are dying of hunger, at such a point that the reason why youths are turning out for andamano every day in large numbers is because they don't have employment? Where is the employment conversation about the youth and the strategies and the policy frameworks that are supposed to, create employment for the youth? Where are the industry conversations? What is happening to the industries already in Kenya that are collapsing because of the high cost of production? I mean, we are talking about about maybe agriculture itself. At what point did the government in totality look at or even seek for expert input in matters to do with the input itself? Is fertilizer what the common farmer needs? I mean, there is so much that is happening in this country that in totality we not just want to say that the conversation we are having is bringing on board the issues that are very pertinent. Right now we are talking about education, for example, Trevor. Education is going to be very expensive in this country. Already it is. It's not a basic need anymore because a common Kenyan cannot afford education at the university. So where is the conversation about this and what can be done so that it doesn't look like luxury? Okay. So until we have all this brought into play, and of course, if that conversation cannot have the common youth, the common woman, the common person on board, then we are not having a dialogue that is inclusive of the people. So I will say until now, this is a politically castigated conversation. We need it to be more people-centered and deal with issues that are bedeviling this country. Okay.
Alenga, are you satisfied with what you've seen on the table from both sides?
First and foremost, thank you, Trevor, for this invitation. And delving into your question, then there are certain imperatives that may not escape my attention. Number one is was there any need for the talks? That's the first thing we should interrogate. There was completely no need for the talks because it comes as post facto to the election, looking at some of the things that even Azimio is listing, like the auditing of the results for the past election. How does that help us as where we are? Because we should be defining another path that helps us to recapture what we lost during the election of 2022 in terms of managing our elections. But then the management of elections in this country still remains a very important aspect of our democracy, and we need to have a concerted effort towards that. That will not take only a few gentlemen and ladies sitting in a room, but is a national conversation that goes to the deeper details of how our elections are bungled and how our democracy is continuously becoming a facade. Number two, we have to look at what necessarily did young people mostly go to the streets for. They were not going there because they wanted two-third gender rule. Two-third gender rule is in the purview of the implementers of the Constitution. It is written already, and there's a prescription of how it should happen. We do not have that. We do not need to take that to a table to discuss now what does two-third gender rule mean and how can we implement it. The most important thing that took people on the streets was the high cost of living. And that high cost of living can be addressed at policy level. It can be addressed without necessarily sitting people in bombers to discuss for a whole month and then come back to us. So where do we start? The cost of living has been exacerbated by the Finance Act of 2023. That's where our focus needs to be. And then number three, when we hear anything in this country that talks about dialogue or talks, however, there's always a denotative and a connotative meaning of a word. But here, dialogue means there's something that people are going to share on that table. When people share anything on that table, will it address the reason why that boy in Nyalenda died, that boy in Emali died, that boy in Kitengela lost his life? He lost his life in the pursuit of trying to get a Kenya that pleases everyone. Each one of us here is here by right. We are not here on the invitation of another person. So we have to be treated as equal citizens. And then I also want to discuss the issue of, or the relevance of the clergy in this conversation. Number one, we have to contextualize this issue. Our churches have continuously been used as the arena for political mudslinging and wrestling and gymnasium, and that continues to snatch the currency of the clergy, even getting a bargaining power to be part of the conversation. A lot of times we have seen the clergy look or seem to wave on certain conversation that happen on the pulpit, and you wonder, and sometimes you sit back and see there are people who are nodding while that person is speaking and spewing vitriol and anger, and sometimes a lot of misinformation. There was a church where a senior member of the Senate stood and actually said Maandamano is evil, it is recorded in the Bible as an evil act. And everybody was clapping. So walking from that direction, and then you ask now you want to be part of the conversations, then we are asking, what exactly are you going to contribute? And you have already taken a stand. You have provided your pulpit as the arena, the official arena. Every weekend we hear this was said, that was said. Lastly, Trevor, we have to interrogate the place of the Constitution in all these talks. I have read the Constitution, and I don't see anywhere where the conversation of converting that which is deliberated in Bomas gets into acquiring a legal perspective. It does not make sense. Okay. And therefore, this Constitution, unless we guard it, it will progressively be clawed back, as they have already started attempting to claw back Article 37. And this is now the time maybe to start interrogating how can we experiment Article 1 of the Constitution.
Okay, and we'll come to that and find out what your thoughts are in terms of experimenting Article 1. But Reverend, I'll give you a right of response, because Alenga is saying you don't, as the clergy, not you as a person, you don't seem to have the moral standing to be involved in this conversation, because your pulpits have been used to spew vitriol and have also been taken to split the sides.
Yeah. I think every person has their own opinion to perpetuate and to foster, just as my friend here has his own opinion. But we have to note a few things. Number one is that nobody is supposed to have the authority to discredit the church. The church has been there. The church is a church, and the church does not mean that the church can only be called the church when it is in another place. Yeah. But the church in your area is not the church. You can be sure that there is no church that can claim to have had any candidate in an election when you talk about the church. Because if the church in a particular region supports a particular candidate, maybe loudly or softly, they support their candidate if there is such a church. But I don't know of a church that has always said that we as the church, meaning the entire church, where you have the African instituted churches, the Anglicans, the Presbyterians, the SDAs, all of them together saying, we are supporting a particular church, a particular candidate. Nobody has ever done that. So whoever is thinking that the church supported a particular candidate is wrong, to the effect that there is no church that can vote. Voters are not the church. Voters are citizens. So you cannot say that the church is supporting. Of course, we have some people who are in the church and can support their own candidates loudly, but that does not mean that there are no other church leaders who are not supporting who are supporting their candidates so softly.
But the concern here is, where is the trust, Reverend? The people have the trust in you to be their advocate.
The trust will always remain, because we are like assuming that every church, every leader who claims to be a church leader is theologically trained. Some are not properly trained. Some are not trained to handle issues the way they are supposed to handle them. And therefore, in their own feelings and their own opinions, they can stand and make statements. But those statements cannot be lumped as the statement of the church, because we know people who talk their own opinions, which is not the opinion of the church, and not even the opinion of their own church, where they lead. And so the church still remains the church, and church leaders are still leaders in this country. And if there is any discussion on issues of governance and the direction that the country should take, nobody should discredit the church and say that the church does not have a voice and should not have a voice.
So this voice that you will foster, what will you be talking about? Will you be talking on behalf of the people or on behalf of the church itself?
We are not talking on behalf of the church. We are talking on behalf of the people of Kenya, who we also lead. Because we lead the people of Kenya. We don't lead just churches. We lead the people of Kenya. As church leaders, we are leaders in this country. And who do we lead? We lead the citizens of this country. So when the citizens of this country are pinned down by bad governance, we stand to say that the people of Kenya must be respected by whoever is in authority. And we don't ask anybody any permission to say that, because we are equally leaders in this country. If the government is wrong, we say it is wrong. If the opposition is wrong, we say it is wrong. And that does not mean that when today we say the opposition is wrong, the government should tell us, the government should tell us we are, when we say this section is wrong, it remains wrong. And a wrong cannot be baptized as a right. So we are here as church leaders to do what? To represent the people of Kenya at the table of discussion where real issues are being discussed. And we are here also to defend the people of Kenya by saying that let us move away from the issues that trigger whatever they have triggered, but let us get to the real issues that affect the people of this country.
What are those real issues, Kevin? If you were to give your submissions to the committee, what are the real issues that you'd like them to table?
Trevor, there are a number of issues. And I think that, as I said earlier on, we have been here before. In part, some of those past processes have actually helped us to bring out the issues. And my colleagues have also delved in some of those issues. And one of those issues is really the place of young people, youth employment and unemployment. As we speak today, we have more than, that is employable youth who should actually be given places to benefit and get something at the end of the month, if that is what I would call employment. 2.8 million young people, and the number is increasing every year. And if you look at the analysis which was done by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics just about 2 weeks ago, the numbers are skyrocketing by the day. Looking at where we stand today, we don't see a very clear plan. Of course, His Excellency the President has talked about the plan that captures housing and how we want to transform our young people or the youth of Kenya through housing and the kind of job opportunities that are there. But you ask yourself, so for how long is this young person supposed to wait against the human trains that we see every single day? Because the government plan has started, is going on, and has not started. Because what is going on currently is what was initiated by the Jubilee administration. The Kenya Kwanza budget was just read the other day, and then it faced hurdles in the court until finally there is some glimmering light at the end of the tunnel. So when is this young person who graduated 2 weeks ago from our institutions of higher learning, over the 79 of them, including the TVETs, where are they going to get jobs? That is a conversation that I believe should really spur our leaders to warrant even having a national conversation on unemployment. And even if we have to do the mechanisms of what we see happening at Bomas, can we have the space opened up? So that the issues are opened up and the membership is also opened up, so that we don't just have a bipartisan, bilateral process, but we have a process that also is inclusive to the other voices that are left out. Because if we fail to deal with the employment issues, Trevor, then of course insecurity is going to spur up. And there are cities right now in Kenya, Nakuru is burning, and every day from various WhatsApp groups, we have people reporting cases of mugging, people pretending to be boda riders, and they are, they are really messing up with young girls, young women, and even stealing from them, threatening their lives, etc. And we can go on and on and on, including northeastern Kenya, all the way to Baragoi, Sabaot areas, etc. The second issue is a cost of living issue, which I think I don't want to delve over and over into, because that is a matter that has really been canvassed.
It's one of the issues in the Azimio lineup, except the Kenya Kwanza side doesn't agree that it's a conversation.
But unfortunately, Trevor, yes, it is an issue in the Azimio lineup, but on black and white, it is not there. It is there in their mouths. It is there when they are speaking in political rallies. It is there when they are in churches trying to play catch-up to Kenya Kwanza. But insofar as what we have read, which is written, from the moment they trooped to bomb us. We don't see it written anywhere. They will come to the press and say, we still insist that cost of living has to be an issue. But I even checked this evening. The issues by Azimio include audit of last year's election, which is written, inclusivity in national affairs, respect for political parties. But the matter which is in their mouths insofar as what needs to really excite Kenyans and is part of what warranted these talks, the cost of living is in their mouths, but we don't see them talking about it. The government, Kenya Kwanza, has told us that we have tried to navigate, and the president has been talking about agriculture, and that now people are reaping, and we need to, fertilizer has been brought down. Of course, it is obvious, because people have gone to their farms, they have gotten maize, and for the next almost 4 to 6 months, we won't see people in farms. Whether fertilizer goes down to 2 shillings, nobody's going to buy it, because people are not farming unless for areas that have different short rains and etc. And of course, government also has to come up with a plan through the extension officers to support those farmers. The third issue, Trevor, in my view, is justice for the victims of the demonstrations. And by this, I mean the families that lost their loved ones. Where are they in this conversation? The businessmen and women whose businesses were attacked, people got in and stole things, CCTV cameras, we saw videos, and we have been to some dialogue sessions in town halls in various counties, particularly those that were worst hit, and people have owned up to, being attacked and property being stolen. And they'll even show you, this is our CCTV camera, we have reported to the OB police station. No one is doing anything about it. Those are Kenyans that need attention, particularly to be able to motivate them to continue to do business. The people who went beyond their powers are traverse what the Constitution in Article 37 says, right to demonstration, need to be arrested, and they need to be charged. And accountability, Trevor, needs to be seen to be done. The policemen and policemen who used excessive force, live bullets, whether you were in uniform or not. Yeah. We saw people hurling guns and pistons. Who authorized the usage of live ammunition, live bullets? We have a law, a very good constitution of Kenya. Yeah. We have the National Police Service Act that actually mandates the police to protect him or herself if your life is in danger. From what we saw happening, whether people were carrying stones or machetes, what was this issue that warranted usage of live bullets? So I think that as people retreat to have the conversations, accountability for duty bearers is an issue which I think needs to be talked about. And going back to IEBC is an issue which I think needs to be canvassed
both
properly.
Sides agree on.
Exactly, and I think that's one thing that interestingly both sides are agreeing on it. But the bottom line is, where do we move on insofar as strengthening institutions is concerned, having progressive institutions, and by this is not just for the IEBC, Trevor, because even as we talk about IEBC, the selection panel is in place. They are earning, they are going on with their business, and nothing has stopped them, because we have not seen a circular or a gazette notice stopping the engagements with the Mheshimiwa Nelson Makanda's commission. Where does that end? Beyond that is a judiciary. How do we continue to build trust among Kenyans that if we have elections in 2027 and you are aggrieved and you go to the Supreme Court judges will respect your opinion, whether you are losing or winning, without telling you this is hot air, this is vague, you should have read the Constitution well, you have come here to waste our time. The language and the attitude of public servants and state officers is a matter which, in my view, doesn't need talks, but is something that, because we now have the opportunity and the platform to have a conversation, Trevor, is something that I think needs to be talked about, because that erodes trust. It takes us back against all the gains that we have continued to make as
all right, Tabitha, I'll come to you in just a bit to hear what your issues are according to you, but I have to take a quick break. When you come back, we'd like to hear from you as well at Trevor Mbiji at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. What are the issues according to you? All right, we'll come back in just a bit.